Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right. Sorry to switch gears on you guys like this, but warning for those watching. The video we're about to share is a bit graphic. I'm certain many of you watching and listening are aware that this past week, a video was released of the brutal murder of Tyre Nichols by 5 Memphis police officers who were part of an elite unit called the Scorpions. Now, in the video, Tyre is pulled over for a traffic violation. And the officers seem highly agitated, angry throughout the video. They end up violently pulling him out of the car, forcing him to the ground. And the entire time, Tyre is complying and letting them know he's trying to comply. He says, he can be heard saying, okay, I'm on the ground. You guys are really doing a lot right now. I'm just trying to go home. He actually seemed to be, in my opinion, de-escalating the situation. And then they're still yelling at him, pulling his arms violently behind his back, threatening him, trying to tase him, even saying they're going to break his arm. And Tyre is clearly fearing for his life, and he breaks free, runs away, and they eventually catch up to him, beat him, slap him, pepper spray, kick. They were just going in on him. And at one point, he's on the ground crying for his mom. And they did this relentlessly for like 3 minutes. One of the videos seems to show him standing up so that they can punch him several times in the face and then get more hits with a baton. They kick him several times while he's completely incapacitated. And they finally let him up. They sat him up against a car, and it was at least like 20 minutes before he received any medical attention. And this is even though paramedics had been there 15 minutes before that. And they just sat there letting him, sat there letting him bleed out or internally bleed. Now, he ultimately does die from his injuries. One thing that's very, very important to note is all the police officers were black. 5 of the police officers have been charged with murder. So let me just start with your reaction to what you saw in the video. I'm going to start with Gianni.
Highly disturbed, disgusted. I feel like just watching how they're handling his body, and you can see like his weight kind of fluctuate because they're like just hanging him, well, not hanging him, but holding him by his arm, and the other one's punching him.
It's like they're holding him up to punch him more, right?
Yeah, it's so torturous. This is like stuff that you see in like video games or like movies. It's really, really disgusting. It almost looks fake. Like my brain has a hard time of actually believing it. It's very, very disturbing. That's my initial reaction. Um, honestly, but I also I found it interesting that all the officers were black, and I know this might digress a little bit, but all the officers were black, and inside of the article they were called criminals immediately. Like they were considered criminals. I don't know.
So you're saying you have concerns with the fact that they were,
they are criminals. They are, in this sense. It's true, but I just feel like, for me, there's an underlying thing going on with the media and how they're portraying cops, and they're obviously deciphering that they're black cops, so they're criminals. White cops that have been in similar circumstances haven't been called criminals.
All right, well, let me ask this question. Is a problem with white versus black, cops versus black, or just cops in general, cops versus everyone?
It's them versus us. Yeah.
I think that the issue that we have here is, it's one that you have a racial component to it, and then you have a police component to it. Mm-hmm. That we have an issue in our police departments of people who should not be there because they are not protecting or serving. We have an issue in that you have to, say, well, what was different here? And what is different here is that these cops swiftly came to punishment. They were fired immediately. They were charged immediately. And when we look at, we have seen this over and over and over again. And you do have to sit there and say, wait a minute, how come these cops were so quickly charged, and rightfully so, but we have other cops who did not
Right.
get the same
Well,
charges,
let's come back
did
to
not
that.
have those.
Let's come back to that. I mean, I'm because obviously it's different that
Yeah.
they were charged so quickly. It's different than what we've seen in the past. But I'm more asking, are we, because we saw black cops treating a black man like this, right? We're seeing him being brutalized by black cops who you would think would understand.
Sympathize.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
Empathize and understand
I
the
feel like
brutality of what they're doing.
all I hear is KRS-One black cop in my head. That
Mm.
it does not, that does not, race does not
Yeah.
protect you in dealing with the police, no matter what the
So
color of the police officer is.
it's the cop.
It doesn't matter whether it's a white cop or a black cop. Some people feel that the black cops will do just as much or worse because they have something to prove. I don't think that just because they were black, yes, one hand should say you should have looked at this man differently, but then the other hand is that you have your thin blue line and you are going to be behind that blue curtain.
So you think the problem is
And
cops versus black people, or cops versus everyone?
yeah,
Is it just a cop problem?
yes, that's how I feel. I mean, it's
I feel like
anger.
But we
I
know
feel
from
like it's
studies that a lot of people who have psychotic tendencies end up in law enforcement and
Yeah, it's
in
the top
police
10.
services.
Top 10 job
Right?
for psychopaths.
Exactly. It's I know that when this came out, one of the comments Joe had made to me was that she had read a tweet about someone saying, "Hey, I still remember, my high school bully who tormented me, who made my life miserable, and is now serving, behind the thin blue line." And there's a lot of that when you look at some of the law enforcement in your community. You go, you know what? Like, this is a real POS growing up. This person isn't there to protect and serve.
What's a
And this is
POS?
piece
piece
of
of
Piece of
You're really not gonna.
piece of
there you
dungy.
go. Yeah. But yeah, to me, it's the fact that this went on for 3 minutes blows my mind. Like, I wrestled in high school. I know how grueling
3 minutes is a
can
long
be.
time.
Exactly. I can't imagine what was going on
1
for
minute
poor
is a long
Tyre
time.
Nichols, man. Like,
I mean, there was a black cop involved with George Floyd too. I mean,
Good
it's
point.
just like
Mhm.
I mean, it's not it's not the color of the cop. It's the mentality of the cop. It's the mentality of, that they get the adrenaline, and the adrenaline goes on and it kicks in, and then everything else goes out the window. I have a friend of mine, and I mean, I can't necessarily, totally fact check this, but I have a friend of mine in Florida who is saying that, the cops' testosterones are checked, and if they're low, then they're supplemented. Like,
Really?
there's an issue there.
There is an
Like I
issue.
said, I can't fact check that, but that's what she told me. And, there's an issue there.
This is a sense
And,
of superiority that cops have that really annoys the out of me.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
very annoying. It's very, very
every
annoying.
mother is, upset because all you can do is see your child there.
Yeah.
And no matter what you tell your child, comply, do this, do that, this still happens.
It does.
And like, I have I have two children. Luckily my son will hopefully never have to deal with this because of his disabilities. But my daughter could have, because this is happening to girls too. My daughter could have this, and she has her own level of disabilities. She has her own processing issues, and I know that she would absolutely freeze if confronted with someone being aggressive like this in a sense of power. We have got to change, and it's not going to stop until the good cops have to start speaking forward. You've got to get rid of these people. You got to.
So my thoughts are, I mean, just to say my thoughts, I think that it's definitely a cop problem. There's no doubt there's a culture with cops of just the superiority, the psychopath mentality, or whatever it is. But I do think there's still a strong cops versus black people problem. because are cops more likely to kill, hurt, beat black people? Absolutely, and it's because they can. I mean, it doesn't matter that they were black officers. It's police officers that believe they can treat people like they did Tyre. And ask yourself, can you imagine what would have happened if these same 5 black cops were doing the exact same thing to a white man? If Tyre was a white man? You can't, because it doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
It rarely happens. I can't say it doesn't. It has happened, but it doesn't rarely happen.
Rarely happens. It rarely
Not in
happens.
an instance where it's been recorded like this to this extent, and he's been beaten for 20 minutes and
But
nobody's watching.
But that's usually because action happens swiftly in those cases. When it doesn't, when it is a non-person, when it's a person who's not of color, action against that cop happens swiftly, so it doesn't even get to this point because the cop has already been removed or fired. It's just that when it seems to be with people of color, then the cop is still at the job, except if
those same black cops, if it were a white guy, would not have done what they did. If it was a white guy, I do not believe for 1 second that they would have. It was okay for them to treat a black man that way. And it's a shame that black people, and I love what Jacqueline Robinson says online, these cops are glorified gang members in uniform. It's appalling that they saw a man who looked like them and refused to see his humanity. That's what makes you. That's what makes me angry. I mean, and I agree with her. It's just, it's angering. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah. You said that they were a specialized group, Scorpion.
They were called the Scorpions, a specialized unit, yeah.
So does that mean that they're trained better than a normal cop, or they're trained more specialized to be in
They were more specialized, but they were probably trained to be more aggressive. Clearly. Yeah.
I mean, we could also look at like the history of cops, like the history of policing in this
just
country.
Going down that path too. Go ahead.
Is that, the history of the police force started to recapture runaway slaves. So modern police people of color have always been considered a target of the police force. Yep. And, that's just, whether people like to hear that history or not, that's the history of policing in this country. That's where it started.
Slave patrols. That's how it started, from slave patrols. That's where our system of policing started in this country, were slave patrols. And it was built out from there. So, it's, and there were black slave patrollers. Mm-hmm. They were just as brutal, if not more brutal, than the white ones.
So they had something to prove.
Exactly. So I mean, it's just really frustrating to see.
Part of the irony for me is that the footage that was captured was from a light pole camera that was placed there by police services to help monitor crime in the community.
How ironic, right?
There is some irony in that, but it absolutely captured crime in your community, except that the perpetrators were law enforcement. And this was a vicious, brutal crime. And, it was only 3 houses away from where he was going home. As a parent, I can't imagine, all this activity going on outside and going, oh, geez, what's going down? And meanwhile, it's your child that's being clubbed, bludgeoned to death by the police that have made this traffic stop. And there was no reason for it. I know just listening to some of the articles and senior officials, typically in a case like this, if the perpetrator flees the scene, they don't chase because they have the vehicle. If you've got the vehicle, you're going to find the perpetrator. You're going to find the person that you're looking for.
Exactly.
So they didn't follow procedure at all. They just, I don't know what the heck this was. So
the fact that it was like 4 predatory. Or 5 on 1.
Yeah,
they didn't need all those cops.
It's a predatory beatdown. It's awful.
So Robbie, and to what you say, I mean, really resonates with me being considered a black man in this country. It scares me to be pulled over. I mean, every time I get frightened, and then I can imagine myself in Tyre Nichols being that guy who gets pulled over and this group of extremely aggressive cops for whatever reason. We don't even know the real reason that they were being so aggressive because they were hyper aggressive and it didn't come from nowhere. It could have been he was just being, standoffish to them or whatever, but it doesn't matter. We've seen lots of video where cops escalate and refuse to de-escalate. But you can hear him saying, okay, I'm de-escalating, I'm getting down. I mean, I can imagine myself being that guy and just like, because when they're tasing him and beating him and he runs away, I mean, in the past, you would hear people saying, oh, why'd he run away? If he ran away, then of course they're going to. No, because he was clearly in a situation where his life was absolutely in danger. I am resisting. I am running. I am getting away. I am doing everything I can to save my life. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with him having run. He should have run. He should have got away. All right.
I mean, I think also, I was going to say, I think also too, another thing that goes on that we've got that the cops, what the police system's gotten away from. You used to have community policing. Like the cops that were in your neighborhood were from your neighborhood. My father was a police officer for a period of time before I was born. Yes, but
y'all know about that. Y'all know nothing about that.
Yes, I know that. But you have, and you have something that we've gotten away from, and that you have people coming into a neighborhood, and this particular, like other groups, specialized groups in the country, there are other groups just like this Scorpion group. They're going into these quote unquote neighborhoods of high crime. They're already hyper, like, I'm going in to get these bad guys. Everybody in the neighborhood is looked at as a suspect, and they don't live there. They don't know these people. And when you lose that, then you have these things happening. They have no reason to care about somebody on the street because they look at everybody on the street as a criminal.
All right. Going back to your comment about the fact that these black cops were charged so quickly. I mean, why do we think that's the case? Is it because they're black and because they're expendable? Why would they? I mean, I will say Derek Chauvin was charged pretty quickly. I look back, I think he was charged within a couple of weeks. But
these guys got charged within days.
Yeah. Well, I think it was days with Chauvin. I think he was charged. I think the incident happened on the 25th, and it happened. He was charged before the end of the month, so he was charged pretty quickly. But that was,
that was escalated. Everybody
that situation. People were going to riot if he didn't get arrested.
Yeah.
So
they rioted because even if he did.
So he needed to get arrested. But with that being said, outside of Derek Chauvin and that situation, you're right. In most times, you go through these stupid investigations for months. You go through, we have to figure out if they did it, who did what, why did they do it, and they don't get. So these cops were basically expendable, right?
There's another case. We're going to sit there. The case, it was several years ago of the, I want to say she was an Australian woman who was here, and the black cop shot and killed her. Mm-hmm. And he was fired fairly quickly. And, so there is a sense of like black cops, they are expendable. They tend to get fired. I think, I don't have the statistics, but I would say that from what I have seen, if it is a cop of color, they tend to be removed way quicker than other cops do when something like this happens.
And I feel like in this circumstance, because they saw that this was getting escalated as well, maybe not obviously to the extent of George Floyd, but because it was getting escalated, I think they wanted to make a point and cut ties with those cops just to make a point and show people that, this is not something that we clearly don't approve of. This is not policing. And notice, like I said, the words that they use in the article or at the press release, I guess, they were just kind of making it seem like, they were criminals. Which is true though. That's why it's hard for me to speak like that, because it's true. They are criminals, and what they were very true about it. But it's it's just a different underlying tone. It's just a different tone that
I mean, I think you
Okay.
can sit there and say that there is, you can acknowledge, like, yes, they were criminals, they're being called as such, but you can also acknowledge that we have yet to see the same terminology used for cops who've done
for
similar things of other color.
White
The
collar.
dichotomy exists.
And on the topic of
Exactly.
criminality, it's the question of the other officers that were on scene that failed to intervene. They failed in their duty
Yes.
to render
Yes.
aid.
Yep.
The EMTs
20
that were on
minutes.
scene.
Yeah,
Horrible.
Jacqueline Robinson said,
they-
can we also talk about the EMTs who stood around for several minutes and rendered no aid? 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I counted it. Go ahead, Rob.
they absolutely failed to protect and serve. I mean, it's their motto, to
They're
protect
just
and
as
serve.
bad as the people beating them. If you're just
This
standing there
it,
and watching.
it was a mob. This was a mob mentality. It was some weird vigilante justice. Pick up your clubs and pitchforks and go
He
get them.
didn't do anything. That's the
I know
worst
he
thing
didn't have a
about it.
He
weapon.
ran because he was
He didn't
scared.
have drugs. He didn't have nothing on him.
I mean, but even then, they were already aggressively hurting him
Mhm.
and beating him before he ran. So there's something
It's also
else
been
going
stated
on.
the police chief has said that, I saw this today, that she's like, the whole intent of the stop is not being able to be corroborated. Like, what they said for why they stopped him, they've not been able to totally corroborate. They've not been able to corroborate that he was driving
Erratically.
recklessly
Mm-hmm.
or anything. And so, it's, it's I think too, also we have to sit there and say that, there's a black woman police chief who,
Another good
took
point.
action fairly quickly. I mean, that this incident happened like on a Thursday night or Friday, and by Saturday she
So
had
maybe
started
that's the
to take
reason
action,
that this was different. Maybe
and
it's because it was a black police
and
chief, as
and
opposed to
that
just
they
being.
also called in. They've also called in. They called in, the police department called in FBI and DOJ and all these things for
Wow.
review. So these things have happened fairly quickly, which we've not seen in other things. And I don't know if it's just, I think that Memphis Police Department has been in trouble before with the DOJ over things.
Yeah.
And so,
Is that
the
surprise you
question is,
though? Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, that doesn't surprise me one bit.
no.
I'm sure.
But I mean,
No.
to your point about the question of whether or not of why these black men were arrested and charged so quickly, it could be because there was a black police chief who could understand the humanity of Tyre, as Jacqueline Robinson said.
That's a
I
really
feel
good
like
point.
there's a few agendas.
Unfortunately, we could probably talk about it the rest of the day. But let's get to some of these comments real quick. Jacqueline Robinson's been pretty active, so let's see. The fact that they were narrating an alibi for themselves that contradicted what was actually shown indicates that they have done something like this before. The initial press release read like all the others. The victim was blamed, and it read as if he had died after a confrontation. The media needs to scrutinize these press releases with a healthy dose of skepticism. 100% agree.
100.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
One of the cops had been, accused of being with another incident of an inmate being made unconscious before this happened.
Not
Jeez.
surprising. These cops, I mean, just cops in general. I don't trust the police. I mean, it's been in songs and rap songs for years, and it's just I've never really trusted them, but it's worse now that you see people who have, we've heard anecdotal stories I've heard anecdotal stories throughout my life, and now that I'm seeing them in real life, in living color, I'm even more scared than I was before.
If anything, it's a case for less guns and more cameras in the U.S. You need eyes everywhere to protect everyone and to keep everyone accountable.
All right, is this
Then
truth?
we're gonna be like China.
Lies, shenanigans. I'm worried about the cameras. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know about the cameras. They want
I
to.
think
They
it's
want
a
us to be like
Shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Truth
It's
shenanigans.
absolutely a truth. It's
Yes.
it's an awful
True stuff,
truth.
too. I am glad that the
Awful
police
train
officer,
wrecks.
for whatever reason, these guys needed to be, they needed more than jail, personally.
Absolutely.
But I am glad that
Absolutely.
they
I
were
know.
quickly
I wish I-
arrested and charged. So, whatever the reason was, I really don't care. They should have been happy if it was even faster. All right.